So the BulletBarry debate is done and over with. It's currently up on Barry's YouTube channel if you haven't checked it out yet, and I recommend that you do check it out before listening to this because I'm gonna talk about a lot of stuff that happens on the debate, and in order to have the right context for what I'm going to say, you're gonna have to have watched the debate or listen to the debate or whatever to understand what I'm saying. So this is going to be a reflection on the debate. Now it's about, as of the recording, it's a day after, 24 hours later, and Barry just uploaded on YouTube a few hours ago, so people are starting to react to the debate. And a lot of interesting reactions. A lot of people said, man, like Barry, you did make some good points, but so did CJ. He also made great points. And I found that very interesting because typically people, in previous debates, people never said that. So I think the general consensus is that I've obviously come a long way. I've become a much better debater now than I have in previous years when Barry and I first did our debates. So, that's at least something that's a good outcome of that for me. And I honestly do think, in hindsight, I still think that I presented better arguments than Barry. And I was ultimately, it's all obviously subjective, but I think that I was the winner of that debate. And it's not out of smugness, it's not out of arrogance, it's because looking back at the debate and reflecting on it, most of Barry's arguments were emotional appeals. And my arguments were more based on how the market works, why the market works the way it is, and why it has to work the way it does. Most of Barry's arguments either had nothing to do with the debate at all, which I will get into, most of his points, that the great points that he made were points that I never even disagreed with in the first place. Like, I'll give one example. Like, he was, giving all this evidence about how the best-selling games are not exclusives and that they're all multi-platforms. But I never disputed that. Actually, that was the central point of my argument, is that the main way that companies like Sony and Microsoft, that the console manufacturers make their money, is not from exclusive content. It's from third-party content. It's the razor and blades method of marketing. It's, you sell the razor for super cheap, and you generally don't even make a profit off of the razor, in expectation that you make all that money back and then some on the razor blades. It's the razor blades method. And that's exactly what console manufacturers do. And, they throw the exclusive content, to draw, because you have all these different console manufacturers, and the exclusive content is the reason why you should buy one console over the other console. And this is the point that Barry obviously seemed to understand, but he still he had no solid rebuttal to that. I'm like, this is the reason why exclusives exist. There's no reason to buy the other and Barry admitted that himself. He said the Xbox One and PlayStation 4 are pretty much identical consoles. And that he pretty much it just shows that Barry did concede on a lot of things, which that alone kind of proved that there is at least some basis to what I am saying, from an objective standpoint. That Barry conceded on a lot of things that I said. But the fact that he spent so much time focusing on that fact that the best-selling games are multi-platform, while I never disputed that at all, and again, that was the central point of my argument, is that the reason why console manufacturers are in the business is to sell games. Not just exclusives. They don't sell exclusives to sell the game itself. They sell exclusives to sell the console that sells more games. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't think he understood that completely. I mean, he seemed to get most of it, but that's the central piece. The reason why console manufacturers are in business is not to make and sell exclusives. They make and sell the exclusives to sell consoles, and they sell those consoles so you can buy all those games. You can buy the big releases on the PlayStation Store. Destiny, Battlefield, Battlefront, Call of Duty. That's the bulk of Sony's revenue and Microsoft's revenue. So that's why there's really no need for Barry to focus so much on multi-platform games when he was pretty much just adding fuel to my argument, because that was pretty much my entire point, is that they make exclusives so that you can buy their console and then you can buy all the games that are available on it. That's the point of the console manufacturers. That's how they are in it. I mean, you look at all the consoles that just survive on exclusives alone. That's what the Wii U did, and it was a failure. And then you look at the consoles that only had third-party support, and they were also failures. But I feel like I needed to clarify that because I looked at the comments and people said that was like one point Barry had over me, but I never disputed that at all. Like whatever. I think we should move on from that because it's not important enough it really wasn't a central aspect of the debate about how well exclusive games sell, because that's not the point of exclusives in the first place. As far as every other part of the debate, all of his rebuttals were based on his personal beliefs and his personal opinions, not actually on facts and how the market works. And I'll give a few examples of that. So one of the last points that I made in the debate was how innovative console exclusives are. And I mentioned Mario and Sonic specifically, because those are like the two of the most innovative franchises in all of gaming. But you also had Halo, which I know started off on PC, but it's the height of its popularity was on consoles. I mean, that's, Halo 2, Halo 3, they were very innovative titles. And I mentioned all those innovations, and he said, "Well, no, those exclusives suck." I'm like, "Well, that's your opinion, Barry." He's like, "No, it's true. The console exclusives suck." Like, meaning PlayStation and Xbox exclusives. They're just copy-pasted games. God of War is just a copy-pasted game. All these other games are just copy-paste games. And I'm like, "Well, okay, Barry, that's your opinion, but there are more people who don't agree with that than do agree with that." He's like, "No, but they're just shit games." And I just found that to be very interesting, because his whole argument was that exclusives are bad, but meaning bad for the industry. But if the games aren't good anyway, then why do you want them on your platform so bad? That's one point I never understood. And another thing that I found interesting is that I said console exclusives are good for the industry, and he automatically, like at the beginning, I mentioned Nintendo, Sony, and Microsoft, their reasoning for making exclusive content on their platform, and pretty much said, look, the Nintendo Switch, the only reason why the Switch is so popular, at least at launch, was because of Breath of the Wild. And he admitted that, and he was like, well, no, I'm not talking about Nintendo. But I'm like, Nintendo is well, then you're kind of admitting that I'm right then, because Nintendo is a console manufacturer, and they make console-exclusive games. And then his whole argument was like, well, no, Nintendo makes great games, and Sony and Microsoft, they just license. They're like EA. They just buy developers, and that's all they do. They don't innovate at all. And this turned into a whole conversation about Sony and Microsoft don't deserve to be on top, because the only reason why they're on top of the industry, or at least the console industry, is because they hold these games hostages, and that's the only way that they can achieve growth. And they haven't done any positive contributions to the gaming industry. They're just there because they have their exclusives, and that draws people in, and that's about it. Anybody else can easily replace Sony and Microsoft, and the gaming industry without Sony and Microsoft would be fine. And I found that to be just completely... That's when his whole argument just became completely absurd. To say that Sony and Microsoft withdrawing from the gaming industry would somehow be a good thing, because Nintendo has done all these innovations and Microsoft and Sony haven't. And I just, I should have gone on him. I should have went harder on him on that, but I wasn't prepared that he was going to say something that ridiculous. But just reflecting on it, like, think about all the innovations that Sony and Microsoft have done as console manufacturers, all the innovations that they've done. I mean, the first thing I can think of from the top of my head is Xbox Live. Xbox Live, non-innovation, Barry? Really? I mean, I consider Xbox Live to be more innovative than the Wii motion control or the Switch's, hybrid handheld console gimmick. I consider revolutionizing online gaming and making online gaming as we know it mainstream. I consider that to be an innovation, Barry. Also, I mean, the Kinect, I guess, would be another quote-unquote innovation, although that the Kinect is pretty much dead at this point. But what other innovations have Microsoft done? Well, more recently, Huge innovation. Microsoft brought back backwards compatibility to consoles. The reason why backwards compatibility has been gone for so long is because Microsoft, they are not Microsoft and Sony. They didn't feel like, because it would have just raised the price of their console if they included, because it used to be on hardware. That's why the PlayStation 3 cost so much, because it included a PS2 built inside of it. So Sony redesigned the PS2, or just, didn't include the PS2 chips inside of it, so it couldn't run PS2 games. And, that really negatively affected the quality of console gaming for at least a generation. Then Microsoft recently came along and said, we developed, because Microsoft is great at software. They're great at innovating when it comes to software. Hardware, not so much. That's not their specialty. But software, they're brilliant software engineers. What they did, and I don't need to explain this to you guys because you already know about the backwards compatibility program. They found a way to be able to put your disc in, and it reads it, and it installs the game. It can't actually read it like, manually from the console itself, but it has some kind of software features involved where backwards compatibility is essentially back in console gaming. So that's another innovation I can think of right there that happened this generation. But yeah, the most innovative thing Microsoft has definitely done is Xbox Live. People are going to say, well, we've had, I saw someone in the comment make some absurd argument. Well, yeah, we had Xbox Live, but there was also SegaNet that came before it. Can you honestly compare SegaNet on the Dreamcast to Xbox Live and its features? That's just a completely ridiculous argument to make. But yeah, no, Xbox Live is one of the most innovative things in all of gaming, first of all. And then on the Sony aspect of it, why is the PlayStation 2 the best-selling console of all time? Because they pretty much innovated not just the gaming industry, but the entertainment industry in general. The DVD feature was a reason for Sony to buy a Sony console. Although, many people didn't buy a PS2 to play games. But you could say the same exact thing about the Wii. Barry was praising the Wii during our debate, and I was mentioning, like, the Wii... Like, I just found his argument to be very weird. He said Nintendo exclusives are good because they have all these gimmicks in their consoles, and it makes them unique. They don't just rely on exclusives to be unique. And I was saying, okay, because the Wii has some shitty... Because Nintendo often includes shitty gimmicks on their consoles that don't... They have a half chance of working. Sometimes they work with the Wii, but sometimes they completely flop, like the Wii U, like the Virtual Boy, like other consoles they've tried to develop. So it's kind of like 50-50. So just because they have some shitty gimmick involved means that, because that was his argument. You look back at the debate, and that's what he said. He said Nintendo exclusives are fine. I don't include Nintendo exclusives in this argument because they innovate in other ways. And I said, well, Sony and Microsoft also innovates. They said, no, they don't. If Sony and Microsoft are only, at the top because they hold games hostage. They don't do anything else innovative. I already mentioned Xbox Live and backwards compatibility, and even the Kinect to some extent, because that was kind of a thing for a while. But what about the PlayStation 2? Who did motion controls before everybody else? It wasn't Nintendo. I mean, it's kind of a moot point because the whole motion gaming thing is kind of dead. But just to make a point, the iToy did that way before the Wii did. And I believe Sega had motion controls before everybody else did. So, that's just an interesting point. And also with the DVD player, with the PS2, going back to that original point that I was trying to get at with the PS2. DVD player, that innovated the entire entertainment industry as we know it. The DVD player and the PlayStation 2. So, Sony doesn't innovate. Well, they pretty much innovated all of entertainment with their PlayStation 2 console. That's not worth mentioning. Or how about that Sony they introduced discs, DVDs, optical discs into physical media while Nintendo was still stuck on cartridges? That's not innovation. To a lesser extent, the Rumble feature, that's not innovation. I mean, every controller has Rumble feature now. Who invented that? It was Sony. At least in the console market, Sony invented vibration controls, which I found ironic that they took it out when they're the ones that innovated it on the PS3 and then put it back in. But that's a whole nother conversation. But yeah, no, to say that Sony and Microsoft haven't innovated is just not true. And then to say that their games are just copy-paste games and they haven't innovated. So Ratchet & Clank hasn't innovated. Sly Cooper hasn't innovated. Jack and Daxter haven't innovated. Those are all your opinions. But they have brought unique gaming experiences that other people have never had before. So is that not an innovation? Or Little Big Planet, man, that you have never seen a game like that before. With create your own platformer on a console like that. That was a huge innovative game at its time. So to say that Sony and Microsoft haven't innovated it just shows your bias. It's not relevant to the exclusive argument at all. The only reason why I'm bringing it up is just because it just shows how biased Barry is. He says Nintendo exclusives are fine because he likes Nintendo exclusives. He admitted he loves Breath of the Wild, he loves Zelda, but no, he thinks Sony and Microsoft exclusives are crap. Well, that's your opinion, Barry. I keep trying to explain this. It's your opinion. And that was really the focal point of all of his arguments, were how he feels and not how things are. How he feels things ought to be instead of how things are, and why things are the way they are. And that was the whole basis of my argument. And and I was especially appalled. I was just astonished when he was bringing up console gaming and how, oh yeah, if Sony and Microsoft, hypothetically, because I said, look, if we didn't have exclusives anymore, we wouldn't have 3 console manufacturers. We'd only have one, because that's the main driving force for competition in the gaming industry, is exclusive content. And that's in any industry also. And I just feel like if you are on one platform and you're complaining about not having exclusives on the other, that's just you being entitled and nothing else. That's really what it boils down to. It's your sense of entitlement. If you're a Netflix subscriber, you're not entitled to shows that Amazon has produced. So if you are on an Xbox console, or it's generally PC gamers that make these stupid arguments. I mean, let's face it. That try to make the argument that exclusives are bad because they're not on our platform. And, the games would be so much better if they were on PC. They would be of much better quality. And I'm saying, you do realize those games would not exist if Sony did not fund them. And I kept trying to make this point to Barry, and Barry said, well, no, they're holding it hostage. I'm like, but they're funding it. They're the reason why those games literally existed in the first place, because they said, we're making this game exclusive. Here is the money for it. Barry, it just went through Barry's head. He just couldn't understand why exclusives exist. It was just all this entire debate was just based on Barry virtual signaling for the consumer. Oh, it's anti-consumer that we have exclusives. And I tried to explain, Barry, you can use all the buzzwords you want, pro-consumer, anti-consumer, but it doesn't hide the fact that things are the way they are for a reason, and you can't really. I asked him, what's the alternative? He said, oh, well, Sony and Microsoft can just put their games on PC, and that's how they'll make all their money. And I was saying, well, Barry, then if that's the case, then why haven't they done that yet? And that's one way I got him by the balls. It took him a while to come up with a response, and he was just stuttering at words, and he's like, oh, well, they haven't done it yet because they're greedy. And I'm like, well, if they're greedy, then why haven't they made it multi-platform? Because you said yourself they'll make more money if they do that. And that's one way. I definitely got him on that. No matter what anybody says, I got him on that. And he was like, he didn't know what to say about that, because it kind of destructed his entire argument. Is that, well, it would be great for Sony and Microsoft to do it, while you're admitting that they have no incentive to do that, because you're saying they're greedy and they're holding their exclusive hostage, while at the same breath saying that they would make more money if they listen to you. And I'm saying, you think that you know more than Sony and Microsoft on how to run their business? Look, I respect Barry, and he's a good person, and I have no issue with him at all. All the things I'm saying about him, it's not insults against him personally. It's just insults against his debating style, because his debating style is honestly people criticized me 2 years ago on just using my debating PC versus console on my opinions. It wasn't a basis on objectivity, but I am the one being objective in this debate, while Barry is just using his feelings. Oh, Sony and Microsoft exclusives are crap, which okay, then why should they be on PC then if they're awful games? but he's just like, oh, Nintendo is good, but Sony and Microsoft are bad. He was just, it's the focal point of his main arguments on why exclusives are bad for the industry was all based on his opinion, on his personal beliefs, and that's what it was. And I don't know. I think I did. I ultimately think I won the debate. I am very proud of my performance. I think the side of exclusives being good for the industry is not a moral position to hold. It's more of just acknowledging reality and acknowledging the way the gaming industry is, and that there's really no alternative to it. I've asked, like, how can Sony and Microsoft compete with each other? He said, well, they can't because they're similar consoles. And I said, you do realize then you want to create a monopoly in the console industry, because if there's no exclusive games, there's no exclusive content, what's the point of having 3 consoles? And Barry admitted this. There is no point. So then I'm like, you're pretty much advocating for a monopoly in the console gaming industry. You're advocating for less competition, but that's somehow pro-consumer. I just I still can't wrap my head around that. How is that pro-consumer to try to stifle competition? You're advocating for stifling competition and to try to limit competition by taking away exclusives, which, is the driving force for competition in the entire industry. I can't wrap my head around that. And just one more point before I close off on this reflection thing on this debate. So, one thing that Barry said that I also had a problem with is that he said that the only reason why console gaming is popular is because of exclusives, and console gaming's popularity has nothing to do with console advantages over PC, because PC is a superior platform, which I didn't even object to, by the way. I actually said, I don't know if you guys remember, or you guys caught it. Maybe my mic was cutting on and off, so you might have not heard it. We did have some technical issues, but I did say, yeah, all your PC versus console stuff, you're right. PC is better than console. But you're kind of proving my point, because you're saying you are advocating for getting rid of the one thing console gaming has over PC. The one main thing, at least. I mean, sure, there's some advantages, like, it's more convenient, and, the price range is usually better because they don't make money off of the console itself. That's why it's cheaper. When you're selling to hardware manufacturers, when you're buying a PC, they have to make the money off the hardware. But if you're buying a console, they do not necessarily. So there will always be console advantages, but those advantages aren't enough to have 2, 3, 4 main consoles competing with each other. So when you're pretty much advocating for policies that would cause the collapse of the console industry and the collapse of the entire gaming industry. He's like, no, it won't collapse because we have PC. And I've explained to him, like, look, Barry, like, yes, on paper, PC gaming is bigger than console gaming, but not the way you think it is. And I've explained it to him, and he just didn't seem to get it. He thought it was some kind of knock on PC, but it wasn't. It was just simply looking at statistics from an objective standpoint, not saying, oh, let's look at numbers. PC, 33 billion, consoles, 29 billion, or whatever number it was. Because PC is bigger than console, if you just look at those raw numbers. But you don't look at the actual, the statistics behind those statistics. He didn't even bother looking into it. And I explained to him, look, China is a country where PC gaming, half of PC gaming's revenue comes from China. Now, why is that important? First of all, it's important because a lot of the games that you guys play isn't even available in China. Most of the PC games that Chinese players play are games like online MMOs. Those are the main PC games that Chinese players play. And, there's some games that they could play. They could play PUBG. They could play certain other games, but, Battlefield 4 was banned because it was a threat to national security, according to China. Certain other games are banned because they're considered threats of national security. The PlayStation, good example, PlayStation 4 has a library of over 1,000 games, but only 52 of them are available in China. And the consoles were banned from 2000 until 2015. So the argument that Barry was trying to make is that, well, console gaming is a big market, but it's not genuine. And I'm saying, well, you can say the exact same thing about PC. PC gaming's growth is not genuine either. Now, I'm not saying PC gaming is small. I'm not saying that PC gaming is irrelevant, but in North America, console gaming is a much more relevant market than PC. And I explained the whole China thing to him, and he didn't understand it. He didn't understand the point I was trying to get at. The Chinese gaming market was $24 billion compared to the PC's entire gaming market, which was $33 billion. And China only less than 1% of the Chinese gaming market, which was $24 billion in 2016, and $33 billion was the entire PC gaming market in 2016. Consoles make up less than 1%, not even 1%. You can't even quantify it. It's such a small number that it's not even worth mentioning in statistics. Less than 1% of the entire Chinese gaming market is consoles. And that's because consoles are banned for so long, and all the big exclusive releases are considered threats to national security or just banned in China for whatever reason. The PlayStation 4 only has 52 games available in China. And you're wondering why console gaming isn't big over there? Because they're banning all the games that are on it? But the greater point I was trying to make is that he pretty much said that if the console gaming industry crashes, the entire gaming industry wouldn't crash because the gaming industry is so diverse and so versatile that we won't have a crash. I'm saying the gaming industry as we know it consists of all these different games, all publishers like Ubisoft, EA, and Activision. You think that they would be sustainable? They would make nearly as much money as they did? Would it even be as comparable if consoles just went away? And he's advocating for policies that would really do away with consoles, because you'd create a monopoly. They would pretty much be able to do whatever the fuck they want, that one console in the market, and that would ultimately lead to a crash, because that's exactly what happened with Atari. Atari was the only game in town, and they ran the entire industry into the mud because they made shitty policies and no one else could counteract them because they were the only relevant console in the market. And that's exactly what would happen if you got rid of exclusives. You would have no need for multiple consoles. You only have one console, and they would pretty much... Can you imagine if Sony was the only console? You think they would do right by the gamer? Come on. They're a corporation. They're in it to make money. So, yeah, no. They would be left to make whatever the stupid decisions they want to, and there would be no force to counteract them. Can you imagine if the PS3 came out and the 360 didn't? How awful things would be in the gaming industry right now? Come on, Barry. You don't seem to get it. You just don't seem to get it. So, yes, there would be a gaming crash if Sony and Microsoft left the market. Don't think otherwise. The numbers prove it. Most of the AAA gaming sales come from the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One versions of the game, and not the PC version. Not because PC gaming is a smaller global market, but because all of those types of games are most popular on console. Like I said, the most popular PC games are those MMO games that the Chinese play, because there's 1.4 billion people in China, and consoles are heavily restricted by the Chinese government. So to say that the console gaming market is only relevant because it's being manipulated that way, and then not realizing that that's exactly the same thing for the PC market, just makes that whole thing a moot point. So, those are pretty much my main objections to the debate. Everything else that I said was, everything else that was in that debate was pretty much spot on. But those are the things I felt like I need to go over in detail because, people said that Barry won over me in those parts of the debate, and I just completely disagree. And I felt like I need to clarify those points and prove why all the points that he made against me were wrong. If I haven't done that well enough on the debate, I'm doing it here. So, yeah, this is pretty much all I have to say about this whole exclusivity, whether or not it's good for the industry or not. It's pretty much being a dead horse at this point. I really have no more interest in talking about it. I mean, I did an hour-and-a-half debate with BulletBarry. I added another half hour on as a reflection-type piece to complement the debate. So that's over 2 hours, plus all the videos I've made about the topic that I think I'm ready to move on. If you guys want me and Barry, it's all up to Barry, but, you look at some of the stuff that Barry says on his channel, you look at the stuff that I say on my channel, if you find anything else, because our debates are fun. If you find anything else that we completely differ on, then ask Barry like, hey, you want to debate CJ on another topic, and if you want that to happen again, then hit us up. Let us know what else you want us to debate on, because while I did have a problem with the way Barry debated, our debates are still fun and entertaining. Like, we have a good dynamic together. So I would love to do more debates with him. But yeah, I just had some serious problems with the way he presented his arguments, and anybody who just looks and say, "Oh, look, Barry completely wiped the floor with you, and you just completely lost," is just obviously clearly not looking at this from an objective lens. These are ultimately, it's coming from a position of entitlement, not a position of actually looking for the best interests of the industry and all the consumers. You're just looking out for the PC gamer. And Barry specifically thinks that PC exclusives are bad, but most of you probably agree that PC exclusives are good for the industry because they don't have any technological barriers. Can you imagine Arma and those type of games being on consoles? How much less of quality those games would be? So I'm pretty much emphasizing, like, yeah, exclusives in general, not just console exclusives, are good for the industry. And people who think otherwise are just entitled. They want to have their, PC gaming has literally every benefit, objective benefit you can think of. And, you talk about console gamers, how they're not being objective, talking about the graphics, talking about all that other stuff, all the advantages that PC has over consoles. But then, at the same time, they want to have their cake and eat it too. And, by eating it too, I mean having every game available on that platform. Like, one of the few advantages consoles actually do have over PC, you just want to take that away. And if that's not entitlement, if that's not fanboyism, I don't know what it is. What is? What is it then? It's just, it just baffles my mind. You talk about how objective you are. All these YouTubers talk about how objective they are, but they're just ignoring all the objective benefits and objective reasons as to why exclusive games and exclusive content exists, not only in the gaming industry, but beyond. So, yeah, I've pretty much said my piece in this. There's really not much else to say. That's pretty much it. Hopefully Barry is watching, he's listening, and he can get a better understanding of where I'm coming from and why his points in his debate, why his whole general argument was flawed, and it just completely fell apart.